Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at something really fascinating. We often hear about the European Union or the EU on the news, and honestly, it can sound like a huge, super complicated political machine. But today, I want you to think about the EU in a totally different way. I want you to imagine a massive workplace team made up of 27 different people, all trying to complete a giant group project together. Every single country is a team member, and they each have their own ideas, their own background, and their own goals. Our goal today is to figure out exactly how this giant team manages to actually work together and get things done. I want you to think about your own experiences for a second. Have you ever been in a group project at school, or maybe a team at work, where people just could not agree on what to do? How did you solve those disagreements? Well, when you have a team of 27 different countries, you absolutely need specific rules and really clear procedures. Without them, the workplace would just turn into total chaos. So the EU has developed a system to make sure everyone is heard and decisions can actually be made. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at who makes the rules. Second, how the team votes. Third, working together. And finally, your role in society and how these big ideas connect directly to your own future jobs. Let's start with Section 1, who makes the rules. This is all about delegating tasks in the EU workplace. Every good team needs to know exactly who is in charge of which tasks. If everyone tries to do the exact same job at the same time, nothing ever gets finished. In EU politics, you're often going to hear the word competences. Now, I know it sounds very formal, but let's break it down. In a normal workplace, a competence is simply your job responsibility. It just means who has the power and the authority to make the rules and decisions for a specific task. To prevent confusion, the EU clearly divides up these job responsibilities. And this brilliantly illustrates how that work gets divided. There are three main categories. First up, we have only EU, or exclusive competences. Here, the EU's the boss. Only the EU can make the rules for things like the single currency or competition policy. In the middle, we have shared. Both the EU and the individual countries can make laws about the environment or trade, but they have to work together, and the EU's rules take priority. Finally, on the right, we have only countries or national competences. For major things like defense, security, and health policy, the individual countries have the final say. Let's look at a real-world example to make this super clear. Think back to the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember how health policy is a national competence? That means the EU literally could not act like the boss and force countries to make specific health rules. Instead, the EU acted as a helpful supporter. They helped coordinate the distribution of vaccines for the entire team, just making sure everyone got what they needed. It's a great example of knowing your specific role in the workplace. Let's move on and see how this builds into Section 2. How does the team vote? Agreeing on a direction. When it's time for the 27 member states to make a group decision, the first way they vote is called unanimity. Basically, this means 100% agreement. Every single country must say yes. The EU uses this for really sensitive topics, like foreign policy or taxes. Now, the great thing about unanimity is that it protects small countries. Literally, no one can be ignored. But there is a big downside. It takes a very long time, and one single person can block the whole team. For example, when the conflict in Ukraine began, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban delayed some EU sanctions against Russia. Because the rule was unanimity, that single disagreement paused the whole process for the entire EU until they could reach a full consensus. Now, of course, not every decision is that intense. For the easiest, least complex daily tasks, like basic administrative work or simple office procedures, the team uses a simple majority. Just like in a normal meeting, if most people raise their hand, the decision passes. It's a fast way to keep the workplace moving smoothly. But for the vast majority of their everyday work, like trade or environmental rules, they use a system called qualified majority voting. This is the default style. And to pass a law this way, there's actually a double test. The first rule is that at least 55% of the member states must vote yes. That just ensures that more than half the team agrees on the overall direction. Now, what's really interesting about this is the second part of the test. Those countries voting yes must also represent at least 65% of the total EU population. Why do they do this? Well, it's a brilliant compromise. It prevents a group of very small states from blocking progress, but it also completely respects the size of the larger states. It creates a balance, ensuring that decisions are fair and democratic for the millions of citizens actually living in the EU. Which brings us to Section 3, working together, the co-decision workflow. This workflow is the standard procedure used for about 80% of all EU decisions. It is really the heart of how they get things done.
To understand it, think of the EU as a giant company with three main departments that absolutely have to cooperate. First, you have the European Commission. Their job is to represent the interests of the EU as a whole. Next, you have the European Parliament. They are the voice of the everyday EU citizens, the people. Finally, you have the Council of the EU. They represent the national governments of each individual country. So these three departments have very different viewpoints, but they must work together to create a final product.
So the crucial point is how these three departments actually interact. It happens in 3 steps. Step 1, the Commission proposes a brand new law. Step 2, the Parliament and the Council take that proposal, review it, and suggest changes or amendments. Step 3, both the Parliament and the Council must agree to make it a law. In this procedure, the Parliament and the Council have equal power. Neither side can force the other to do anything. They have to talk, compromise, and find a solution together. And amazingly, because of this highly structured cooperation, they actually usually agree on the very first try. All right, our final section, your role in society, taking this to your workplace. You might be wondering, why does all of this huge political stuff matter to me and my future career? Well, if you look closely, the EU is really just practicing essential workplace skills on a massive scale. Soon, you're going to be entering the workforce. You'll need to know how to delegate responsibilities clearly, just like the EU does with its competencies. You'll need to find compromises when people disagree, exactly like the Parliament and the Council. You're going to have to balance different voices and personalities, just like qualified majority voting balances large and small countries. And you'll need to work through shared procedures to reach a common goal without fighting. The EU's complex voting systems are exactly the kind of teamwork, communication, and problem-solving skills you are going to use on the job every single day. So I want to leave you with this question to really think about. How will you use these problem-solving skills in your next team project? The next time you're working with others and face a tough disagreement, remember the EU team. Think about how you can share power, listen to different voices, and find a compromise that moves absolutely everyone forward. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it helps you see group work in a whole new light.